I stood beside Everett's casket, hands folded back straight the same way I used to stand beside him at the end of long meetings when no one remembered I'd been in the room. The church smelled of lilies and overcooked coffee. My dress was black, simple cotton. Nothing dramatic, just what I had. Just what I always wore to hard things. That's all she could afford. Vanessa's voice cut through the organ music like a knife through old cloth. Loud enough for the pew behind her to laugh. One of her cousins leaned in and whispered, "Poor thing. She's got nothing left." I didn't flinch. Not outwardly. I just kept looking at Everett, or rather the man who used to be him. The suit he wore in the casket was the same one he wore to Drew's wedding. Vanessa had chosen it then, too. Drew hadn't come over to me. He stood with Vanessa adjusting his cufflinks like someone on a stage who didn't know their lines. He glanced at me once, then looked away. The service went on like it wasn't about him. The eulogies came from men I barely knew. They spoke of Everett's business sense, his charm. The lake house he'd renovated last fall. Not a word about the nights he spent coughing on the porch so he wouldn't wake me. Not a word about what he promised me the morning he died. Vanessa took photos with guests afterward. "We'll make a little slideshow," she chirped. She didn't ask if I wanted to be in any. I wasn't even in the group picture with Drew. Later, someone offered me a ride to the reception. I declined. I walked home. The hem of my dress caught on the gravel, but I didn't stop. If it tore, it tore. When I got home, I made tea. The silence in the kitchen was louder than the church had been. I sat at the table and reached for the old drawer Everett never let anyone touch. The reception was held in the community center off 5th, the one with too many folding chairs and not enough light. I sat near the back, close to the wall, where the air conditioning hummed louder than the music. Vanessa stood in the middle of the room, laughing, shaking hands, like she'd hosted the event herself. She wore pearls and heels and a shade of lipstick too bright for morning. She called Everett Dad in front of people who'd never met him. She talked about his boat, his smoked ribs, how he once grilled in a thunderstorm. Everyone laughed. I listened. No one asked me to speak. Not once. I watched men I didn't recognize toast my husband, like they'd known his quiet better than I had. The pastor mispronounced our last name and thanked Linda for organizing the flowers. I didn't correct him. The food came from Vanessa's cousin's catering company. Mini crab cakes, pasta salads in glass jars, napkins printed with Everett's initials like it was a retirement party. A woman with a clipboard handed me a paper plate and pointed to the kitchen. "You can sit in there if you want some quiet," she said. She didn't look at me twice. I sat on a stool between the utility sink and a mop bucket. My name wasn't on the program. No one noticed I wasn't at the table. No one asked where Everett's wife had gone. I suppose they assumed Vanessa had taken my place there too. When I left, it was still daylight. I didn't say goodbye. I drove until the road narrowed, then pulled over beside the old textile mill, where Everett once took me dancing on New Year's Eve. The building was shuttered now, vines growing through broken windows. I parked, reached into my purse, and unwrapped the foil. 2 slices of roast beef, 1 apple, a hard biscuit I'd made the night before. I ate in silence, the hum of traffic, distant a single bird crossing the windshield, like it had somewhere more important to be. And when I got home, I opened the drawer. The phone rang just after 9. I hadn't finished my tea. Drew's name lit up the screen, and for a moment I let it ring once more, just to see if I wanted to hear his voice today. I answered on the 3rd. He didn't ask how I was. "Mom, we've got a bit of a mess with the estate taxes," he started. His voice was clipped like someone already halfway out the door. "The lawyer said Dad's accounts were sparse. There's some property still under your name, though." I waited. "Vanessa thinks it's time to sell the land upstate. You know, the one near Spruce Hollow." I blinked. The barn. I'd walked through that barn every fall since 1981. Everett had wanted to build a greenhouse there. I remembered his boots crunching over frost, his breath curling in the air, as he stood in the doorway and said, "Maybe next year." "I'll need some time," I said quietly. Drew sighed, and the sound scraped something inside me. "I mean, come on. You're not seriously planning to hold on to an old barn, are you? It's not like you're going to go raise goats. We could get good money for it now." I pressed my fingers to the table's edge, felt the wood give slightly beneath the weight of my grip. "Let me think about it," I said. Another pause. He didn't like that. "Well, just don't wait too long. Vanessa's parents are already talking to someone from their church about a buyer." Of course they were. He hung up soon after no goodbye. I placed the phone back on the table and didn't touch it again for hours. Outside, a truck passed slowly up the road, carrying fence panels and empty flower crates. I got up, walked to the drawer again, and opened it all the way this time. The lock was old, the kind Everett always said he'd replace. I used a letter opener pried gently, and the drawer slid open with a tired sigh. Beneath old receipts, a matchbook from our honeymoon, and a faded photo of Drew in middle school, there was a single manila folder, thin, clean, labeled in Everett's block letters L.A. Hold. I opened it slowly. Inside were property records. Not just the barn upstate, but 3 other parcels. One near Asheville, one in Tennessee, one I didn't even recognize. They weren't in Everett's name. They were in mine. Held through something called Horizon Private Holdings LLC, a trust account. Quiet, legal. Buried under layers of paperwork, all neatly filed, all signed by Everett. My name, my full name, was listed again and again. Near the back, clipped to a typed memorandum, was a handwritten note in Everett's sharp all-caps script. "He'll never know if you don't tell him. But if they ever push you, remind them who built this." I ran my fingers over the page. He hadn't signed it, but he didn't need to. I could hear his voice behind every word. It wasn't about hiding money. It was about protection. From Drew's carelessness, from Vanessa's ambition, from being erased even in death. The barn wasn't a leftover. It was a marker. I flipped to the last page, accounting logs, valuations, contact names I didn't recognize. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew enough. I closed the folder, placed it on the table, and stared at it until the sunlight crawled across my hands. It felt warm, steady. I folded the note, tucked it into my apron pocket, and stood. I didn't need to call anyone yet. Not today. Instead, I walked to the front window when I heard the distant sound of engines. The morning of the service, I took my time. No one expected me early, and no one had asked if I'd be attending. I wore the same black dress, pressed a little sharper this time, and fastened the brooch Everett gave me after our 25th anniversary. A quiet piece. Just enough. The church was already full when I stepped onto the sidewalk. Vanessa's voice echoed from inside, bright, lilting, rehearsed. She was introducing a slideshow, something Drew's friend had thrown together. People laughed softly at photos of Everett holding a fish or standing in front of a new fence. Nothing of the man I knew. Nothing of us. Then came the sound. At first it was just a murmur. Tires on pavement. Then the first car turned the corner. Black sedan. Polished chrome. Then another. 3, 4. By the time the 6th pulled in, the parking lot had hushed. Phones came out. Heads turned. The lead driver stepped out, walked to the rear door, and opened it for me. I didn't say a word, just nodded and stepped out. My shoes touched the pavement like it belonged to me. I caught Drew's face through the stained glass, confused. Vanessa was already halfway down the aisle when she saw the men in suits, the way they held their hands behind their backs, not looking at her, not smiling. "Who are they?" she asked. Her voice was sharp this time. No lilt, just tension. No one answered her. I kept walking, not rushed, not slow, just steady. When I reached the church doors, the ushers instinctively parted. Inside, the slideshow faded. A man clicked off the projector. I didn't need a spotlight. I didn't need an announcement. Every pair of eyes followed me as I walked past the pews and sat in the seat I'd once given up out of politeness. No one asked me to move. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and let the silence settle around me like armor. And when the service ended, one of the suited men leaned in and whispered, "Ms. Ames, your advisor is waiting." Ms. Cade arrived exactly on time. She didn't look surprised by the size of the house or the plainness of my kitchen. She set her briefcase on the table without a word and handed me a card. Horizon Private Holdings. Legacy Advisory. Discreet Stewardship. We were instructed to reach out once you access the folder, she said. Your husband left detailed instructions. She opened a slim leather binder and turned it toward me. 8 years ago, Mr. Ames placed you as the ethics chair on the Horizon board. It's a non-voting position publicly, but internally you oversee distribution approvals, family disbursements, major asset decisions. I blinked. I don't remember signing anything. You did. He had you sign a stack of home refinance papers in 2015. It was slipped in. Fully legal. You've been active ever since. I sat back. My mind went to all the dinners Everett cut short, the calls he took in the garage, the times he told Drew. Your mother sees things I don't. I thought he meant emotionally. He always trusted your instinct, Cade added gently. I opened the binder and scanned the most recent notes. Vanessa had requested funding to start a private social club. Denied. Drew had submitted a request for early access to his portion of the estate. Flagged. A note in Everett's handwriting read, "If he asks before I'm cold, he's not ready." Ms. Cade slipped a final document across the table. Thicker paper, typed in full. Disinherit recommendation. Drew Ames. She didn't say anything. She just let it sit there between us like a question I already knew the answer to. I'm not ready to sign, I said. My voice was calm, but my chest tightened around each word. Of course not. You're not required to. This is just the file you now control. When she left, I walked to the dining room where Everett's picture still sat in the corner. I lit a candle not for him, but for the clarity settling in my bones. Then I pulled a pen from the drawer and opened an envelope addressed to Drew. I wrote the letter in one sitting without crossing anything out. It wasn't long. Just 2 paragraphs in a single printout. Drew, your father, believed in you. That's why he didn't leave you a crutch. He wanted you to build something on your own terms, not on someone else's name. Not mine, not his. Enclosed is a summary of your trust account. It is currently frozen pending review. This was not done to punish you. It was done to protect what's left. I know what you've become. I also know who you could still be. I signed it with my full name, folded it neatly, and placed it in an envelope. The copy of the trust balance was clipped inside a figure high enough to sting. I used the heavy paper. The kind Everett always kept for job offers and retirement notices. He came the next afternoon. Didn't call first. Didn't knock long. Just pushed the door open hard enough to make the wind chimes scatter across the floor. You froze my account, he barked. Are you serious? I stood from the kitchen table. Calm. Waiting. You think you can just erase me? You think Vanessa's just going to sit back and let this happen? Before I could answer, a voice behind me cut through the tension. Mr. Ames, please speak respectfully. Drew turned. 2 representatives from Horizon stepped forward. Ms. Cade was one of them. The man beside her was older, holding a slim black folder in both hands. Your mother has full discretionary authority over all disbursements, she said. And your file is under formal review. Drew's mouth opened, then closed. His face flushed with something between anger and disbelief. You're letting strangers tell me what my own father left me, he snapped. No, I said softly. I'm telling you. He stood there, breathing hard. I didn't move. Neither did Cade. After a long silence, he turned, muttered something under his breath, and left the door open behind him. I didn't close it right away. I just listened to the echo to the wind. Then I turned to Cade. What comes next? It didn't take long for Vanessa to start whispering her version of things. At church and group chats, even in line at the market, she told anyone who would listen that I had manipulated Everett, that I had waited until he was cold to strike. She said I was bitter, jealous, unstable, that I never understood business, that I never liked her. For a few days, the stories floated around like dust. Annoying, but harmless. Then someone forwarded me an email thread. It was short, careless, and signed with her name. Vanessa had contacted a broker about the upstate land, the very one Drew begged me to sell. She claimed she was authorized to represent the family estate. She even attached a blurry scan of an unsigned deed. But Horizon had already flagged the property months ago. It was under trust, in my name. Vanessa had no authority, no legal standing. The next day, Horizon's counsel sent her a cease and desist. 2 days after that, her name was removed from all public filings related to family assets. She was officially barred from speaking on behalf of the Ames estate in any legal, financial, or charitable matter. The silence came quickly. Her name was quietly removed from a charity board. A fundraiser rescinded her RSVP. A woman she used to tag in photos posted a cryptic quote about snakes in high heels. The digital applause vanished. The group texts slowed. Nobody wanted to be caught standing next to a sinking ship. And Drew, he didn't defend her. He didn't call me either. He just stopped coming around, stopped posting, stopped talking like a man with answers. I passed him once at the hardware store. He was picking up fence posts. Alone. He didn't see me. Back at home, I pulled a box from the hall closet and opened it slowly. Inside was a copy of our will still sealed. And beneath it, the blueprint Everett once made for something we never built. The new attorney was younger than I expected. She wore flat shoes and carried a leather notebook with corners worn soft from use. Her name was Grace, and she didn't blink when I told her what I wanted. I'm not trying to erase anyone I said. I'm just setting a different map. She listened. We spent 2 weeks drafting the changes. The Asheville property became a scholarship fund for girls in architecture. The Tennessee plot, a rural stretch Everett had once dreamed of turning into a retreat, was transferred to a local shelter for veterans and their families. I kept 3 properties, quietly, legally, all placed under my name, still managed by Horizon. One clause was added, just one. Drew would be granted access to any one of the 3 holdings if he completed 1 year of full-time volunteer work. No loopholes, no proxies, no shortcuts. It had to be service. It had to be real. I didn't tell him. The point wasn't to test him. It wasn't revenge. It was a reminder of who he used to be, of the boy who once cried when we passed a dog tied outside a gas station, of the young man Everett hoped he'd grow into, not the one Vanessa carved out of opportunity. I think that's everything, Grace said softly as we reviewed the final documents. Are you sure you don't want to include a statement? No, I said. The paper will speak for itself. When she left, I stayed in the kitchen and ran my finger along the edge of the blueprint Everett had drawn. A treehouse, 2 levels, a rope bridge. He never built it, but he dreamed it out loud, and maybe that was enough to finish it now. That evening, I walked through the back field. The air was crisp and the sky was heavy with stars. I stopped where the ground sloped just slightly, where Everett once said the view would be best. The barn key was still in my coat pocket. I turned toward the shed and walked back for a hammer. I brought the coffee in a dented thermos, the same one Everett used to take to the lumber yard. The walk to the family plot wasn't long, but I took it slow. Leaves had started to fall crisp and light, catching on my sleeves as I passed. The headstone was simple. His name, the dates, and the words. Builder of quiet things, my addition. I sat on the small bench beside it and poured myself a cup. The heat was comforting. The breeze threaded through the trees, carrying a hush that didn't need filling. A car door closed behind me. I didn't turn right away. Drew walked up the gravel path alone. No Vanessa. His hands were stuffed into his jacket pockets, and his hair was a little longer than I remembered. He stood beside me for a moment, saying nothing. Then he sat. I read the clause, he said. I nodded and took a sip. I applied to the shelter program. The one near Boone. I reached into the bag beside me and pulled out a second cup. Poured it steady. Handed it to him without a word. He took it with both hands, held it like something fragile. We sat like that for a long time. The wind shifted. Somewhere behind us, a hawk called out over the trees. Neither of us looked away. He didn't ask about the properties. I didn't offer. It wasn't the day for that. When the sun dipped lower, I stood first. He followed, brushing leaves from his pants. I placed one hand on the stone and whispered something only I needed to hear. As we walked back toward the house side by side, I noticed he matched my pace without trying. And when we reached the edge of the field, I pointed to the slope where the posts had gone in last week. He followed my gaze, then looked at me. You building something? I nodded. Need help? He asked. I didn't answer. I just kept walking toward the frame, the view, the rope bridge we'd once promised to build someday.